The wind whispered through the trees as Daniel drove along the quiet highway, the last rays of sunlight casting long shadows over the cracked asphalt. He wasn't in a hurry. In fact, for the first time in a long while, he felt at peace. He had just left the nursing home where his grandmother stayed, a woman who had raised him after his parents' passing and who, despite her fading memory, still managed to call him her miracle boy every time he visited. Her words lingered in his mind, making him smile softly as the tires hummed beneath him. The road was nearly deserted, flanked by towering pine trees on either side. Daniel liked these drives, the silence, the stillness. They gave him space to think. As he rounded a bend near the edge of the forest, something on the side of the road caught his eye. A flicker of movement, small, barely noticeable, but enough to break his calm. He slowed instinctively. At first, he thought it was an animal, maybe a deer or a stray dog. But as he neared, he realized it was a person, a young woman stumbling barefoot along the shoulder of the road, her hair tangled, her clothes torn and stained with dirt. Her movements were sluggish, disoriented, like she had just awoken from a nightmare. Daniel immediately pulled over, his heartbeat quickening. He stepped out of the car and cautiously approached her. "Hey, are you okay?" he called out, trying not to startle her. She turned to look at him, and for a moment their eyes locked. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, and filled with a confusion that sent a chill down his spine. She looked no older than 20, and her lips trembled as if struggling to form words. I don't know," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I don't know where I am. I don't know how I got here." Daniel took a step closer, slowly, like approaching a frightened animal. "You're safe now," he said gently. "My name is Daniel. Can you tell me your name?" She shook her head. "I don't remember anything. I woke up in the woods. My head hurts. Everything's a blur." Her voice cracked, and she clutched her side as if in pain. Daniel could see she was shivering. Without thinking twice, he slipped off his jacket and gently placed it over her shoulders. "Come on, let me take you to the hospital. You might have hit your head or something. They'll help you there." At first, she hesitated, her eyes darting toward the dark forest behind her. For a second, Daniel thought she might run, but then her knees buckled slightly, and he instinctively caught her before she fell. "That's it. Easy. You're okay," he murmured, guiding her toward his car. He helped her into the passenger seat, fastening the seatbelt gently, like she was made of glass. She sat hunched over, arms wrapped tightly around herself, staring blankly at the dashboard. As he drove, Daniel glanced at her from time to time. Her breathing was shallow, and every now and then, she flinched as if reacting to sounds that weren't there. It was clear she had been through something that had shaken her to the core. The hospital was about 20 minutes away. Daniel kept the radio off, not wanting to disturb her, but the silence now felt heavy. His mind raced with questions. Who was she? What had happened to her? Was someone looking for her? Or worse, was someone trying to make sure she wasn't found? When they finally arrived at the hospital, Daniel pulled up to the emergency entrance. He turned to her. "You're going to be okay. I'll stay with you as long as you need." She gave the faintest nod. Nurses rushed out with a wheelchair when they saw her condition. Daniel explained what little he knew, that he found her walking along the road, that she claimed to remember nothing, and that she appeared injured. They nodded professionally and wheeled her inside. Daniel followed closely behind, watching as they began assessing her. The girl's hands clutched the edges of the wheelchair, but she didn't resist. A doctor examined her carefully, checking for bruises, injuries, signs of trauma. Oddly, her body bore no signs of physical harm beyond minor scratches and fatigue. She was dehydrated, mildly hypothermic, but otherwise, fine. "I've seen trauma like this before," one of the doctors told Daniel quietly while the girl rested in a bed in the observation room. "It's psychological. Something scared her, badly. Her memory loss could be a defense mechanism." Daniel frowned. Will she remember anything? It's hard to say. Sometimes it comes back in hours, sometimes weeks, sometimes never. But her vitals are stable. She's safe now. Daniel watched through the small glass window in the door. She lay curled up on her side, eyes closed, but her fingers twitched occasionally, as if gripping something unseen. Something remembered. He was about to leave, thinking maybe his role in her story had ended, when a soft voice behind him stopped him. Daniel. He turned. It was her. She stood barefoot in the hallway, hospital gown draped over her, the jacket he'd given her still clutched in her arms like a shield. "Thank you," she said. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with something else. Something deeper. Grief. Hope. He couldn't tell. "You should be resting," he replied, walking toward her gently. She looked down. "I know. I didn't want to be alone." Daniel hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Okay, I'll stay." They sat in the small waiting area, the clock ticking softly above them. Neither of them spoke, and yet there was something unspoken between them, an understanding that this meeting wasn't random. That somehow fate had brought them together. She still didn't know her name, or where she came from. But in that moment, sitting beside the man who had found her on a lonely road in the middle of nowhere, she felt, for the first time in a long time, safe. And Daniel, who had only intended to drive home from a quiet visit to his grandmother, had no idea that this simple act of compassion would spiral into something far more profound, something that would challenge everything he believed about fate, identity, and the silent strength that grows in the darkest of places. Neither of them knew it yet, but this was just the beginning. The hospital corridor was silent in the early morning hours, lit by the soft glow of overhead lights. Outside the windows, the world was still wrapped in a gray mist, the first signs of dawn only barely breaking through the heavy clouds. Daniel sat beside the young woman in the waiting lounge, sipping on a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. The girl hadn't spoken much since the previous night, but her presence had shifted. She no longer seemed as frightened, just lost, like someone trapped between two worlds, the one she couldn't remember and the one she didn't yet trust. The nurses had suggested that she stay overnight for observation, but she refused to be left alone. Something about the sterile white walls, the unfamiliar faces, and the beeping machines unsettled her. So Daniel stayed, even though he had no obligation to. It was something deeper than kindness. It was a pull, a quiet, undeniable instinct telling him this was where he was supposed to be. "You didn't have to stay, you know," she finally said, her voice low, barely audible over the hum of the vending machine nearby. Daniel looked at her and smiled faintly. "I know, but I wanted to." She offered a tiny nod, her gaze dropping to the floor. She wore a pair of donated sweatpants now, and a faded hoodie given to her by one of the nurses, but she still had Daniel's jacket draped over her lap, fingers absently twisting the fabric. "Do you remember anything?" he asked gently, not wanting to push but needing to know. She paused for a long time. Just flashes. Trees. Running. A voice shouting in the distance, but I can't make out the words. I feel like I'm reaching for something just out of sight. She closed her eyes for a second, gripping the edge of the bench. It's like I'm trying to wake up, but I'm already awake. Daniel nodded slowly. "It'll come back. Don't force it. Just give it time." Her eyes met his again, searching, studying. "Why are you really helping me? You don't even know me." "Maybe that's the point," he replied softly. "Maybe if I did know you, I wouldn't have the chance to see who you really are now. Not just who you were." There was silence after that, but a peaceful one. A nurse came by to offer them food, plastic-wrapped sandwiches and apples. But only Daniel accepted. The girl barely touched the water bottle in her hand. Later, one of the doctors approached Daniel with a clipboard and a concerned expression. "We ran a few more scans," he said quietly. "There's no sign of trauma, but her stress levels are abnormally high. We suspect she may have experienced something deeply traumatic. We're arranging for a psychologist to speak with her, but honestly, it's rare to see memory loss this complete without any physical injury." Daniel folded his arms. "So what does this mean?" "It means her mind is protecting her from something. But if the memories return, it might not be gently. It could come like a wave." Daniel glanced toward the girl, still sitting silently, lost in thought. He nodded. "Thanks, doctor." When evening came, the hospital offered her a private room, but she refused again. Instead, she insisted on sitting outside in the hospital's small courtyard. The staff finally relented, allowing Daniel to accompany her. They sat together on a bench under a canopy of maple trees, their leaves just starting to turn. The girl tilted her head back, looking up at the sky. For a moment, she smiled. "This feels familiar," she whispered. Daniel turned to her. "What does?" "The trees, the wind, the smell of fall. I don't know how, but this feels like something I've known before. Not a place, a feeling." She paused, her hands trembling slightly. "Maybe I used to go for walks. Maybe with someone." "A parent," Daniel suggested. "A sibling." She shrugged. "I wish I could remember their faces." He wanted to help, to say something that would fix everything, but what could he offer other than patience and presence? So he simply sat there beside her, watching as she gently closed her eyes and let the wind brush through her hair. Then, out of nowhere, her entire body stiffened. Daniel saw it instantly. Her fingers clenched the bench. Her breathing became rapid. Her eyes shot open, but they didn't focus on anything. Instead, they stared into some invisible place only she could see. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked urgently, leaning toward her. I saw something," she gasped. "It was a face. A man. He was angry. Shouting. He had a scar. Here." She touched the left side of her cheek. "But I still can't hear what he said. It was so loud. Too loud." Daniel's heart pounded. "Do you know who he was?" She shook her head violently, eyes wide with fear. "No, but I don't think he was trying to help me. I think I was running from him." Daniel's mind raced. This wasn't just a lost girl. This wasn't just a case of someone who had wandered too far into the woods. There was something much darker hiding beneath her silence, something terrifying. "We should go back inside," he said gently. "You need rest." But she resisted. "No, I don't want to go back in there. I feel trapped in that room. I can't breathe in there." Daniel glanced around the courtyard. It was getting darker, and the air was cooler now. He didn't want to risk her getting sick. "Okay," he said. "Then let's sit here a little longer." She looked at him again, this time with something close to gratitude. "You're the only person I trust right now. I don't even know why." Daniel looked at her, really looked at her. Maybe because sometimes the people we're meant to meet show up at the right moment, even if we don't understand why. She gave a faint, tired smile. Then maybe this was meant to happen. He didn't answer. But inside, something shifted. He had always believed in reason, logic, purpose. But this encounter, it felt like a thread pulling him towards something beyond understanding. She leaned against him slightly, eyes fluttering shut, and Daniel let her rest, careful not to disturb her fragile sense of safety. He knew this was just the beginning, but he also knew, without a doubt, that her story was tangled with something bigger than either of them could yet see. In the quiet stillness of that moment, with only the rustling leaves above them and the distant hum of hospital machinery, Daniel made a silent promise. Whatever storm she had come from, whatever shadows waited in her forgotten past, he would stand by her until the truth came to light. And somewhere deep within her unconscious, the girl, who still had no name, clung to that unspoken promise like a life raft in the middle of a vast, forgotten ocean. For the next 2 days, the girl remained in the hospital's care, though not by force. The doctors insisted she stay, while Daniel stayed too, taking time off work, telling his boss there had been a personal emergency. And strangely, no one questioned it, as if life itself was rearranging just enough to give him the space to help her. She was still a mystery, a puzzle with all the edges missing. No ID, no cell phone, no wallet, no clue. The local authorities had been alerted, of course, and her photo had been circulated to nearby towns and missing persons databases. But so far, nothing. No one recognized her. It was as if she dropped out of the sky with no past and only fear in her eyes to tell her story. Her fear hadn't disappeared. Not entirely. She smiled more now, especially when Daniel brought her fresh flowers or cracked a joke. But there was a weight behind her eyes, like someone waiting for a shadow to fall again. The kind of heaviness that couldn't be erased by good intentions alone. On the third morning, Daniel found her in the hospital library. It was small, mostly used by elderly patients or staff on break, but she'd found a quiet corner and was flipping through books. Not reading, really, just touching them, opening the pages as if hoping one might hold her forgotten name. "Morning," he greeted gently. She looked up. "You found me." "I always do," he said, smiling, like a very low-budget detective. She chuckled faintly. "Do detectives bring muffins?" Daniel held up the paper bag in his hand. "Only the best kind." They sat together by the window as she nibbled on blueberry muffin crumbs and stared out at the street below. "I had another dream last night," she said without turning toward him. His gaze sharpened. "What kind of dream?" "It wasn't just a dream. It felt real. I was standing in a room. A small room with peeling wallpaper. There was a window, but it was nailed shut. I remember screaming. I wasn't alone. Someone was watching me, but I couldn't see their face. I tried to leave, but the door wouldn't open." Daniel frowned, leaning closer. "Did you recognize anything about the place?" "There was a painting. An old one. A cabin in the snow. It was crooked on the wall." She paused, closing her eyes. "And there was music. A music box, maybe. A lullaby. But it was off, like someone had twisted it." Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Do you think it's a real memory?" She nodded slowly. "I don't know. Maybe. It felt too detailed to be fake." He made a mental note of the clues. Peeling wallpaper, a nailed window, a snow cabin painting, distorted music. All pieces. Broken, maybe, but still part of a whole. The doctors had mentioned that memories might resurface in fragments. Not always linear. Not always gentle. But this seemed like more than a coincidence. Her subconscious was trying to tell her something. Something buried deep. Later that day, they took a walk outside the hospital grounds for the first time. Just a short stroll around the block. She clutched Daniel's jacket tight around her shoulders despite the afternoon sun. It was her shield. As they passed a coffee shop, she froze. Daniel turned, noticing her expression change. Her breathing quickened. "What is it?" "That logo," she said, pointing to the coffee shop window. "A stylized sun rising over mountains. I've seen it before. Somewhere. I don't know where." Daniel looked at it. "You're sure?" She nodded. "Not in a dream. In real life. I think I was there." They stepped inside. The barista smiled at them with polite indifference, wiping down the counter. The place smelled of cinnamon and roasted beans, a cozy little cafe with soft jazz playing overhead. "Does anything else look familiar?" Daniel asked. She scanned the room. Her fingers twitched. "That table in the corner. I think I sat there. With someone. A man. He gave me something." Daniel's heart thudded. "Do you remember what?" "No, but it made me cry." The barista came over, offering a menu. Daniel took the chance. "Hey, has this young woman been here before?" "Maybe recently." The barista squinted at her, then shook his head. "Sorry. Can't say I've seen her. Though I only work Thursdays and weekends." "Do you know if you keep security footage?" Daniel pressed. The barista shrugged. That'd be the manager's job. He's in the back. I can call him. They waited tense while the manager appeared. Older man. Kind face, glasses slipping down his nose. He looked at the girl for a long moment, then said, "Actually, yes. I do remember you. You were here about a week ago, with a guy. Looked like an argument." Daniel stepped forward. "Did you hear anything?" The manager shook his head. "No, just raised voices." She stormed out crying. He followed her. "I figured it was a breakup or something. I didn't want to intrude." "Do you have cameras?" Daniel asked. The manager nodded. "Footage only saves for 10 days. You might be lucky. Let me check." They followed him to the back office, hearts pounding, the girl's hand trembling in Daniel's, as if she feared what they were about to discover. On the screen, the footage loaded, grainy but clear enough. A timestamp from 9 days ago. The girl, sitting at the corner table, wearing a different jacket, thinner, almost tattered. Across from her, a man in his 30s, dark hair, clean-shaven, wearing a leather coat. He leaned forward, speaking with intensity. Her face showed distress. Then she stood, angry, and left. He followed her outside. The footage cut off. "Do you recognize him?" Daniel asked her gently. She stared at the screen, her eyes wide, mouth slightly open. Then she whispered, "I've seen him. In my dreams. He's the one I was running from." Daniel's blood turned cold. The manager frowned. "You okay, miss?" She took a shaky breath. "I don't know who he is, but I know I was afraid of him. And I think he hurt me." Suddenly, it all felt real. The danger, the urgency. This wasn't just a case of forgotten identity. Someone had tried to erase her past, and possibly her existence. And whoever he was, he might still be looking for her. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat in his living room, the TV flickering in the background, untouched coffee going cold on the table beside him. The image of the man from the cafe footage looped in his head like a haunting melody. Sharp jaw, clenched fists, cold eyes, a face now permanently engraved in his memory. Upstairs, the girl, who still couldn't remember her name, was finally resting. He'd offered her the guest room in his modest home just outside the city. The hospital had reluctantly discharged her earlier that day after declaring there was no medical reason to keep her admitted. They said she'd need emotional support more than clinical treatment. And Daniel had offered just that, driven by a strange, unwavering sense of duty. Or maybe it was something deeper. He didn't quite understand it himself. He had no reason to be this invested in a stranger's life. Yet every time she smiled faintly or looked to him with trust in her eyes, it felt like a purpose he'd been unknowingly waiting his whole life to fulfill. Outside, the wind picked up. Leaves rustled. A dog barked in the distance. Daniel stood and walked to the window, peering out into the dark street. Everything looked calm, ordinary. But his instincts told him the calm wouldn't last. The next morning, he made breakfast. The smell of scrambled eggs and toast lured her from upstairs. She appeared at the kitchen door, her hair slightly tousled, wearing one of the hoodies he'd lent her. "You cooked?" she asked, surprised. "I do that sometimes," he said, "when I'm not rescuing strangers or interrogating baristas." She smiled, and it was the first genuine one he'd seen from her. A flicker of light amid the uncertainty. "I had another dream," she said quietly after taking a seat. Daniel turned to her, concerned. "The same place?" "Yes, but this time, it was different." She paused, picking at her toast. "I was outside. There was snow, a cabin, I think. That same painting from before, but I was holding something this time. A notebook." He leaned in. "What kind of notebook?" "A small one. Brown cover. There was something written inside, but I couldn't read it. The pages were wet, like it had been dropped in the snow." Daniel's mind raced. A notebook could be real. Maybe even a diary or journal. It might have information, names, locations, even dates. But a cabin in the snow. That wasn't something you stumbled upon in the city. This meant she hadn't always been here. Do you think it's a real place? She nodded slowly. I think so. I think I lived there, or was taken there. That word, taken, hit Daniel like a stone in the chest. This wasn't just memory loss. This was trauma. Maybe captivity. Maybe worse. And someone, likely the man from the cafe, was involved. Daniel knew he had to act fast. Whatever had happened to her, whoever she was, someone had wanted her to disappear. But she hadn't. And now that she was starting to remember, her life might be in danger all over again. That afternoon, he visited the local police station with a printed photo of the man from the cafe footage. He told them what they'd found and explained everything, though carefully avoiding certain personal details. The officers were sympathetic, especially once they saw the footage, but they were limited without a formal identity or crime report. Still, they agreed to run the man's face through their system and let Daniel know if anything came up. Meanwhile, back at home, she explored his bookshelf. He found her later flipping through an atlas, her finger tracing lines across the map. This, she said, pointing to a region in the north. This feels familiar. Daniel looked. A mountain range, vast forests dotted with small cabins and wilderness lodges. The kind of area people go to disappear, either for peace or to be hidden. We could drive there, she said. I know it sounds crazy, but maybe I'll remember more if I'm there. Daniel hesitated. It did sound crazy, but everything about the last few days had defied logic. He looked into her eyes, searching for doubt, but there was only quiet determination. We'll leave first thing in the morning, he said. The next day, they packed the car with warm clothes, snacks, and a full tank of gas. Daniel printed out a few maps just in case GPS failed in the mountains. She brought along a small sketch pad and pencil, saying sometimes drawing helped her remember. Before they left, he checked in with the police again. Still no matches on the man's face. The drive took hours. The roads grew narrow, flanked by towering pines and blanketed with early spring snow. Eventually, cell service dropped entirely. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was heavy with anticipation. As they climbed higher into the mountains, her breathing changed. She leaned forward, staring intently at the road. I know this place, she whispered. Turn left at the fork. He obeyed. They followed a dirt road until they reached a clearing. And there, tucked between trees, stood a small wooden cabin. Weather-worn, remote, the kind of place you wouldn't find unless you were looking for it. She stepped out of the car slowly, boots crunching in the snow. Her eyes locked on the cabin like it was calling her home, or back to a nightmare. I've been here, she said, voice trembling. Daniel approached carefully. The front door was slightly ajar. Inside, the air was musty, thick with disuse. A broken chair lay on its side. A table covered in dust. And on the wall, crooked and faded, hung the painting of a snow-covered cabin. Her knees buckled. Daniel caught her just in time. This is the place, she gasped. This is where he kept me. Daniel's heart pounded as he looked around, now seeing the place through her eyes. The boarded windows. The single bed in the corner. The music box on the dresser, its lid cracked, key twisted. But then, something new. In the corner, partially hidden beneath a floorboard, was a brown leather notebook. Daniel pulled it out, brushing off the dust. She took it with trembling hands and opened it. Inside were pages and pages of writing, some in shaky handwriting, some crossed out, sketches, notes, dates, and finally, a name written over and over again in bold, slashing strokes. Elena, Elena, Elena. Tears welled up in her eyes. She whispered the name like a forgotten prayer. That's me, she said. My name is Elena. And in that moment, something inside her broke free. But as Daniel turned to comfort her, he noticed something else on the last page of the notebook. an address, and beneath it, a warning scrawled in red ink. If she remembers, they'll come for her. He looked out the window, suddenly hyper-aware of how alone they were, and how someone might already be on their way. The cold air pressed against the cabin like a held breath, the wind whispering secrets through the cracks in the old wooden frame. Inside, Alina sat on the edge of the dusty bed, the notebook trembling in her hands. Her eyes scanned every line, every shaky word, as if trying to stitch together the pieces of a shattered past. Daniel sat across from her, heart pounding in his chest, watching her fight to reclaim who she once was. "My name is Alina," she said again, firmer this time, like she was convincing herself. Daniel didn't interrupt. He knew this moment wasn't his to own. It was hers. All he could do was protect the space around it. Alina ran her fingers over the last page. The words scrawled in red still sent shivers down his spine. If she remembers, they'll come for her. Who were they? And why was remembering such a dangerous thing? "I used to write here," Alina whispered. "I don't know why I started. Maybe to stay sane. I remember the man. He never spoke much, but he watched. Always watched." "Do you remember his name?" Daniel asked gently. She shook her head. "Only his smell. Tobacco. And something like motor oil. And his boots. He always wore these heavy boots. When I heard them on the porch, I'd freeze." Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "I wasn't alone. There were others." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Others?" She nodded. "I think. There was a girl before me. I found a bracelet under the floorboard once. It had her name on it. Sarah. He got rid of it when he found out I had it. After that, I never saw it again." Daniel's mind spiraled with questions. Was this man some kind of kidnapper? A trafficker? A murderer? The remote cabin, the secrecy, the isolation. It all fit a horrific pattern. He took a deep breath, focusing on what they had now. Her name, the notebook, a possible address. Clues they hadn't had before. They left the cabin quickly. Daniel didn't want to risk staying the night, not after what they'd read. The warning was clear. Someone might come looking. The snow was already starting to fall heavier as they made their way back down the mountain road, the tires crunching through the white. By the time they got to the nearest town with reception, it was nearly midnight. They checked into a cheap roadside motel, using fake names just to be safe. Daniel stayed up late, uploading photos of the notebook to a secure cloud folder, making backups, and researching the address written inside. It led to a warehouse in the industrial outskirts of a neighboring city. On the surface, it looked abandoned, but a quick satellite view showed recent vehicle activity. Fresh tire tracks, deliveries logged from weeks earlier. Too active to be abandoned. Too suspicious to ignore. Daniel shared the findings with a detective he trusted, a woman named Marisol, who owed him a favor from a case he'd helped unravel years back. She agreed to look into it quietly, promising to update him soon. He didn't tell Alina right away. She was finally asleep, curled up under the thin motel blanket like a child after a storm. But in the morning, things changed. When Daniel woke, the room was empty. Her shoes were gone. Her bag too. The only thing left was the notebook, resting on the pillow beside him. Panic surged through his veins like fire. He checked his phone. No messages. Called her. No answer. He raced to the front desk. "Yes, the young lady left about 30 minutes ago," the sleepy receptionist said. Said something about needing air. Daniel's gut told him it wasn't that simple. He drove through town, scanning sidewalks, parks, even nearby bus stops. And then, finally, he spotted her, standing outside a church, talking to an old priest. Daniel parked and ran up. "Alina." She turned slowly, her face pale. "I had to come," she said. I remembered something else. The priest, Father Jerome, looked between them, his expression grim. "She remembered me," he said. "She came here when she escaped. Years ago. She was maybe 15. barefoot, bleeding. She stayed here for 2 nights before running off again. Daniel stared. She escaped before. She said someone was after her, the priest continued. She was terrified. I called the authorities, but by the time they came, she was gone. Elena clutched her arms. I think I didn't want to be found. Maybe I thought if I hid, they couldn't hurt me again. Father Jerome stepped inside and returned with an old photo. In it, a younger Elena stared back, bruised, wearing an oversized hoodie. The date on the back was from nearly 3 years ago. You've been missing for 3 years, Daniel whispered. All this time, no one knew. No one was looking, Elena said softly. I don't think I had anyone. No family, no friends, just him. Daniel's heart ached. All that time. Lost, forgotten. No one searching for her, no home waiting. But now they had proof. The notebook, the photo, a timeline, maybe even a criminal network tied to that warehouse. But they needed more. They needed to expose the full truth, not just for Elena, but for whoever else might still be suffering. That night, Daniel received a call from Detective Marisol. I looked into the warehouse, she said. You were right to be suspicious. It's a front. No real business, no tax records. But there's more. We found something buried in old case files. A missing persons report, dated back 7 years. A girl named Sarah Jenkins, last seen with a man named Victor Rains, known to use aliases, former military, discharged under suspicious circumstances. No confirmed address, but ties to the same mountain region. Elena mentioned Sarah, Daniel said. She found her bracelet in the cabin. Well, Marisol said, Victor Rains is still out there. And if your girl was with him, she might have information that could finally take him down. Daniel looked at Elena, who had just stepped out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, eyes tired but calm. She remembers more every day, he said. She's brave, stronger than anyone I've met. Good, Marisol replied, because things are about to get dangerous. As Daniel hung up, he knew the journey wasn't over. They had names now. A face, a timeline, a trail. But exposing the truth would mean diving back into darkness, confronting monsters, and risking everything. And Elena, she wasn't running anymore. She was ready to fight back. The wind howled outside the police safe house like a restless spirit, rattling the window panes and casting dancing shadows along the walls. Inside, Elena stood by the window, arms folded tightly over her chest, staring at the snow-covered city that seemed both unfamiliar and distant. It had been days since the call from Detective Marisol, and every hour that passed had made the air feel heavier, like a storm gathering just behind her eyes. Daniel sat at the small table in the corner, flipping through a folder Marisol had delivered earlier that day. Photographs, witness statements, police reports, evidence that painted a dark and disturbing picture of Victor Rains. According to the documents, he had been a ghost for nearly a decade, slipping in and out of towns under different names, always managing to stay one step ahead of law enforcement. Victims had come forward over the years, but their stories lacked enough evidence to stick. They disappeared again, terrified or silenced. But now, with Elena's testimony, and the physical proof from the cabin, the bracelet, the journal, the location itself, they had what they needed. Elena, Daniel said gently, holding out a photo. Does this mean anything to you? She turned slowly. It was a grainy picture of a girl, no more than 10, with sunken eyes and tangled hair, standing next to a rusted trailer. Behind her, half obscured by shadow, was a man in military-style boots. Her breath caught. That's him, she whispered. That's Victor. Daniel nodded. It's enough to issue a warrant. Marisol is already mobilizing a task force. But Elena didn't look relieved. If anything, she looked heavier now, as if some invisible weight had settled on her shoulders. What if he's still out there? She asked. What if he comes for me again? Daniel crossed the room in a heartbeat. Then he'll have to go through me first. And this time, he won't get away. She looked up at him, eyes wide and scared and filled with something deeper than fear. Resolve. I want to testify, she said. I want to tell everything. Not just to help the police, but to make sure this never happens to anyone else again. Daniel could only nod, pride swelling in his chest. This girl who had once wandered out of the forest with no memory, barely able to stand, was now standing tall, facing the darkness that had almost broken her. 2 days later, Elena sat in front of a camera in a quiet, protected room of the precinct. The lights were soft, but the room was serious. Monitors, microphones, officers watching from behind a one-way mirror. Detective Marisol sat across from her, kind but focused, ready to take her full statement. The interview lasted nearly 4 hours. Elena spoke of how she was taken, how Victor had posed as a good Samaritan after she ran away from her foster home, how he had offered food, warmth, shelter, how that trust turned into fear, how he kept her hidden, how he manipulated her mind until she couldn't remember who she was. She spoke of the bracelet, of Sarah, of the others who came and went, some staying only days, others vanishing without explanation. She described the cabin in chilling detail, the routines, the punishments, the escape attempts. By the end, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Marisol reached across the table, squeezing her hand. You just saved lives, Elena. The story broke 2 days later. Local news stations picked it up first, then national outlets. Survivor breaks silence. Elena's story exposes trafficking ring in the Rockies. Her face wasn't shown, but her words were. People listened. People cried. People demanded justice. And with that pressure, the manhunt began. Victor Raines, a ghost for years, was now the most wanted man in the state. Tips poured in from every corner. People who thought they'd seen him, women who recognized the pattern. And then, finally, a break. He was spotted just across the state line, working at a mechanic's shop under a false name. When officers arrived, he tried to run. He made it a few blocks before he was taken down. In his truck, they found more notebooks, more names, more horror. Daniel got the call that night. He and Elena were sitting on a park bench outside the safe house, watching the city lights flicker like fireflies. They got him, he said simply. Elena turned, tears slipping down her cheeks. He's really gone. Daniel nodded. He'll never hurt anyone again. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of all the things they didn't have to say out loud. Relief, grief, gratitude, and a sense that life was about to start again. The trial took months. Elena testified from a secure room via video, and her words shook the courtroom. Others came forward, survivors who had once been too scared to speak. The jury took less than a day to convict him on multiple counts of kidnapping, assault, and trafficking. He was sentenced to life without parole. Afterward, Elena was offered a chance to change her name, relocate, start fresh. But she refused. I don't want to hide anymore, she told Daniel. I want people to know my name, to hear my story. Maybe it'll help someone else speak up. Maybe it'll save someone like me. And so, she began to speak. Schools, conferences, survivor networks. Her voice, once so unsure, now carried strength and compassion and fire. Daniel stayed by her side through it all. He never claimed to be her savior. If anything, she had saved herself. But he was proud to have been there when she needed someone to believe in her. A year after the trial, Elena released a book, The Forest Between Us, chronicling her journey from victim to survivor to advocate. It became a national bestseller. Not for the fame, not for the money, but because it told the truth. One night, after a speech at a women's shelter, she stood on stage as the applause slowly faded. She looked out over the crowd and smiled. I used to be afraid that remembering would break me, she said. Now I know, it's remembering that made me whole. And somewhere in the crowd, Daniel sat with tears in his eyes, knowing he'd witnessed something rare, something powerful. Not just the survival of a girl once lost, but the rise of a woman who refused to be forgotten.